We are now in the month of October. September has come to a close, so I'm going to rank all 5 September new releases that I saw from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Nathan, and I talk about a bunch of movies on this channel. If you're new here, down below in the comment section, share your ranking of the September new releases that you saw, ranked from the worst to the best. Over on my channel, I have more content like this. Check those out once this video is over. If you enjoy what you see, click that like button and be sure to subscribe because it really does help a lot. With that said, let's just get started into the ranking. In last place for me, Expendables, and this was just a massive disappointment on basically every single level. Now, I like the Expendables franchise. I like the first 3 Expendables movies. Even Expendables 3 with the PG-13 rating, I enjoyed it. And what I appreciated about this film was that it went back to the R rating, and so it can have those gore effects that these movies do have. But this movie was just not good. And I think part of the disappointment is because this is the film that I was watching for my birthday. My birthday was the 20th of September. And so on the 22nd, we're just like, yeah, we gotta see Expendables 4. And I left the theater just massively disappointed. Right off the bat, the green screen effects just look so bad in this movie. Where every time they do a close-up shot of the actor's face and there are sequences where they're like ziplining from a boat to another boat, it just looks atrociously awful, absolutely ridiculous looking, and it just has no excuse for any of that. And so, right off the bat, that's just something that I don't get. And this movie, but even beyond that, the plot of this movie, it makes it very clear that it is a Stallone to Statham transition with the plot. And the way that they chose to do it in this movie just did not work all that well for me. The film, to me, stretches it out for way too long of its runtime, where it only has like an hour's worth of plot, and stretches it out for an hour and 50 minutes. I will say it wasn't boring. I was entertained during it, but that's one of the biggest compliments that I could give this movie, and so this one easily comes in last. Number 4, The Nun II. And the biggest compliment that I could give this movie is that it is less dull and less generic than the original Nun film, which I think is just bottom tier Conjuring. This movie at least has less dull aspects to it. And I think some of that is because I think it does have a better, more interesting setting at this boarding school where there's actually kids doing stuff. We'll get into some of the bad stuff later with that, or actually, let's just get into it right now. But the Nun films, inherently, they feel like just very drab, dull Conjuring movies that I don't really think work all that well. And this movie's less dull because it's set in a boarding school, but then like there's a bunch of sequences where elementary school-aged girls are bullying each other, and that's not what I go to The Conjuring for. And the victory of this film doesn't really feel as satisfying because us as the audience who've seen these Conjuring movies, the victory, we pretty much know what happens at the end, or not what happens at the end, but what happens after this movie to this particular character, and so it's not very satisfying. And so overall, just an okay, but of the movies on this list, I think this is the one I'm least likely to rewatch. That brings us to A Haunting in Venice, an okay, solid murder mystery, but I just feel like, much like Death on the Nile and Murder on the Orient Express, that this movie, in spite of all the parts, all the pieces, all the cast, the director, it's never quite as good as it should be, just like the previous 2 films. Whereas Kenneth Branagh, very talented director, obviously, and very star-studded cast in this movie, as well as in Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile. It has all the same elements of those movies, but I just feel like it's just really not as good as it should be, in which, like, Hercule Poirot is a fun murder mystery detective guy, but then again, his movies are just kind of right there in the middle. It's not good, it's not bad, but it's just kind of in the middle right there. I do think this is the best of the 3 Kenneth Branagh murder mysteries. I think the scary aspects bring something new to the mix. The haunted house setting, as well as in Italy, I think that gives it a more distinctiveness to it, and so it's more interesting to me, and I'd say it's better. But overall, it's just kind of a film that's there. Our runner-up is The Equalizer 3, and this is a trilogy of films that my dad absolutely loves, and so when they were releasing a third movie, naturally I was gravitating towards to watch it, and much like the first 2 films, it's just another good, solid, middle-of-the-road thriller where Antoine Fuqua is not aiming to make the biggest action movie that transcends the genre or anything like that, just these solid, middle-of-the-road action movies. And yeah, that's really all you can say about these Equalizer movies, where Denzel Washington is just as good as ever in this film as he was in the previous 2 films.
If it goes to level 4, you will shit on yourself.
The Italian setting is very distinct in this movie, where because it's set in Italy, there's some things you could do with the setting in here. I will say, I don't think it has as strong of characters as the first 2 movies, where, in the second one, Pedro Pascal was the villain, and the first one, you remember the villain of that one. This movie, I don't think it has nearly as good side characters, or the people that Denzel is working with, as well as the villain. But, and also another one, I think because of that, I think this is my least favorite of the 3 Expendables movies. But, as just a cool little thriller, I was game for it. And so, if my dad loves the Expendables movies, I am inclined to enjoy them, and I do. They're pretty good, solid little thrillers. But without question, in first place is The Creator. And it's quite fun to me that Denzel Washington and his son, John David Washington, have 2 films that came out this month that I really enjoy. But the one that I really, really, really enjoy is The Creator, which is in my top 5 of the year thus far. I just thoroughly enjoyed this film, and because of that, it just had some fantastic world building. It built out the bond properly between John David Washington's character as well as the child AI. And while it's fairly familiar, it brings this newness into the mix that makes it its own thing. Of course, you gotta talk about the visual spectacle when it comes to this film. And the budget of this movie is only $80 million if you look up on its Wikipedia page. And it's just so unbelievably immersive. It feels real and lived in, probably because it is set in LA and on Earth instead of Star Wars, where it's these big gigantic planets. This one's actually on Earth in the future, and despite it being quite a familiar story about these 2 people that bond and some person that changes his worldview, it never actually feels like a copy of previous sci-fi artificial intelligence films. And so I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. This is one of my favorite movies of the year, so it is my favorite movie in September. There you have it, that's my ranking. Over on my channel, I have more content like this. Check those out right now. Click that like button, be sure to subscribe, it really does help. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to the end, and I will see you in the next one.